Welcome back to Super Recaps. Today I will recap a science fiction romantic film from 2021 called The Map of Tiny Perfect Things. Watch out for spoilers ahead. Mark awakens after his mother leaves for work. He goes downstairs and sees his father and sister, Emma, having breakfast. Mark is able to predict everything they'll say. His response and timing are also perfect for whatever happens in the kitchen, and he even knows the answers to the crossword puzzle his father needs help with. After breakfast, he goes out and roams around the neighborhood, and he can predict various events that are about to occur. He pulls up next to someone who is texting while driving and takes their phone away. He then even informs a random stranger that his lost keys are in his bag. He then catches a ride on the back of a truck and approaches a girl and helps her with the directions without her even asking. Mark goes to a construction site, and when the workers are on a break, he gets in and rides their tractor. Later at a diner, he even wins the lottery. In the afternoon, he is relaxing by the community pool when he notices Phoebe, the girl he gave directions to earlier. He anticipates that she's going to fall in the pool and saves her, leading to them becoming friends. They talk for a while, and after that, he accompanies her home. When they reach, he asks her to hang out in the evening, but she politely declines. Next, Mark goes to see Henry, his close friend. While Henry is playing a video game where his game character constantly dies and rests pounds, Mark contemplates how it would be to live a life where you could respawn and repeat the same moments over and over again. Mark talks about how if he had that ability, he would use it to do good, whereas Henry just considers using it to get girls. But Mark argues that getting girls is more difficult than that, recalling the several times he failed to catch Phoebe's interest. Henry agrees that unlimited opportunities can also lead to endless failure since he'd be stuck in the loop forever. Mark then wonders if he'd rather prefer to stay in the loop because he'd be the center of the universe. Henry, on the other hand, says that the loop would eventually become repetitive and tedious. In the next scene, once it hits midnight, the time loops, and Mark is back to the same day. His morning and breakfast are the same as the previous day, but today he also plays the tuba and sketches. He then goes to the community pool again to try and win over Phoebe with a different approach. Unfortunately, just as he is about to save Phoebe by catching the ball, another girl does it before him. Later, Mark visits Henry and talks about his encounter with the blonde girl. He expresses his confusion about who she is and where did she suddenly pop up from. The only clue he had was the missing dog flyer she dropped before leaving. But when Mark tried calling the number on the poster, the man who answered the call claimed to only have an 8-year-old daughter. After that, Mark tried to look for her many times, but he has been unsuccessful so far. One day, Mark is at a diner where he notices someone left a $100 tip. His interest is piqued, and he thinks it might be the blonde girl, so he decides to follow the person. It turns out that he was right, and it is indeed the same blonde girl. She introduces herself as Margaret and reveals that she is stuck in a time loop as well. Mark is happy to discover someone in the same shoes as him. He inquires about what she's been doing while in the time loop, and she says that she's been trying to learn how to drive. And in return, Mark tells her that he's been trying to save the world in whatever small way he can. But Margaret warns him to not set his sights too high. After their little chat, Margaret tries to leave, but Mark distracts her by showing her a funny dog incident. To keep her attention, he shows her more coincidental and funny sights, but eventually, Margaret gets a phone call and has to leave. Mark gets her phone number by making an excuse about how they should stay in touch because they are both going through the same thing. The next few days go by quickly for Mark, and he tries to do a lot of new things. He even changes his haircut and texts a picture of it to Margaret, but she does not respond. After waiting for a bit, Mark asks her for a casual hangout. So, they meet the next day and talk about their different time loop experiences. Mark asks her about the craziest thing she's done during this time loop, and she responds by showing him how she drives. While driving, Margaret also opens up about her desire to work as an aeronautical engineer at NASA. Margaret then puts on some music in the car and remarks on how bad her friend's music taste is, admitting that she stole the car. She then drives Mark to the woods. They get out of the car and walk towards the lake, where they watch a bird swoop down and take a fish from the water. Margaret recalls seeing the same sight when she was searching for the missing dog, but now she has given up and realized that searching for the dog is hopeless. Margaret gets a phone call again, so she drives Mark home, and as he gets out of the car, she immediately picks up the call and promises a guy called Jared that she'll be there soon. Once Mark goes home, he is inspired by his conversation with Margaret and decides to draw Sisyphus. In the next scene, Mark jumps off the roof a few seconds before midnight. The time loops once more, and Mark wakes up in his bed the next morning. During the day, he brings Margaret to see a group of skaters. A young girl tries to join them, and the rest of the skaters make fun of her, but she shocks them all by performing the trick they've been failing at. Mark then takes Margaret to drive a tractor, and while she's driving, Mark inquires about Jared. Margaret gives a vague reply and says he is 21 years old and a med student. During lunch, they discuss their theories about the time loop, and Mark questions whether the time loop is all about admiring the little perfect and coincidental moments, such as watching the bird capture the fish. Margaret, on the other hand, is doubtful about his theory. She is about to leave the diner when Mark dares her to find all of the perfect little moments that happen in their area on that particular day. Margaret is not convinced because she just wants to live out the day normally, but she eventually agrees to stay after Mark tells her that this is their chance to make their situation meaningful. They decide to go to a store, where Margaret leaves cash in random places. While at the store, she starts talking about the fourth dimension and how it's possible that they're just the mere shadows of the fourth dimension people. In the next moment, they discuss how exactly they'll find the perfect coincidences around town. And in the end, they decide to simply just go around and look for them and note them down on a list. A few days pass by while Mark and Margaret drive about town, looking for tiny moments like traffic being delayed by a turtle crossing the road, an old couple playing chess, and a pair of wings from a van perfectly aligning behind a man. Margaret also discovers a 3-leaf clover and a wonderful piano performance by a construction worker. On one of the days, Margaret even forces Mark to study maths. She jokes about how she can't be friends with someone who doesn't comprehend logarithmic function. After the library session, they go outside and witness a flawless cloud formation. Eventually, Margaret's phone starts to ring, but she ignores it for a few moments and says that she sometimes wishes for the time loop to never end. When Margaret tries to leave this time, Mark tries to convince her to ignore Jared just this once, but Margaret doesn't listen and leaves anyways. At night, Mark's father approaches him in the living room to discuss his future plans. Mark jokes about wanting to be a priest or a member of the Space Force. A few moments before midnight, Mark shocks his father by showing him a dragon tattoo on his stomach. The following day, Mark tries to Google Jared, but has no luck. He visits Henry and talks about his feelings for Margaret and expresses his disappointment at the fact that she constantly leaves him after 6 p.m. Henry suggests that Mark take her somewhere private to show her that they truly have a connection. Following his advice, Mark brings Margaret to a school gym the next day, where he has cutely set up a little space station and moon. The two then have fun pretending to be astronauts for the rest of the day. Mark tries to confess to Margaret, but can't muster up the courage to go through with it. Instead, he asks her to get on his bike, and they pretend to be astronauts going back to Earth. Later, they both go to Mark's house and talk about how they may always wake up at the same time and place. It's as if something is putting them to bed. They go through Mark's family photos as they walk, and Mark explains that he rarely sees his mother as she works still late at night. He also talks about how his father recently resigned from his job to write a book about the Civil War. After talking about himself, he inquires about Margaret's parents, but she changes the subject. They watch a movie together. And while Mark is in the bathroom, Margaret finds a sketch of the map he made of all the little perfect things they've encountered so far. Mark is embarrassed when he sees that Margaret has found the map, and he admits that he redraws it every day. Margaret thinks it's great and encourages him to go to art school. Mark then reveals that he drew the map because he's been looking for a pattern, hoping to discover something. And when the moment feels right, Mark moves in to kiss her, but she rejects him and prepares to leave. Mark is annoyed and asks her to tell him what's going on with her and Jared, but Margaret simply refuses. She emphasizes that she doesn't want to accidentally change something since they are already stuck in a time loop. She tells him that they are better off as friends, and so Mark can't do anything but accept it. After she leaves, Mark sits on the rooftop, heartbroken and depressed, as he waits for the next day. After he awakens the next morning, he decides to do something different and asks his father about his mother. His father merely responds that she is fine. Mark then rants about Margaret to Henry, who is pretty bewildered by his friend's situation. In the next scene, we see how frustrated Mark is as he screams about how he hoped he'd find at least some success after reliving the same day over and over again. The following day, Mark tries to avoid his father, but his father eventually confronts him about his future once more. Mark claims in frustration that he has no future because he is trapped in a time loop. He then lashes out at his father for preventing him from attending art school while he himself quit his job just to publish a book. Then Mark goes to his sister's room to tell her to stop playing the violin. While he is there, his sister questions him about his conversation with their dad, and Mark admits that he raged at him about abandoning his job to write a book. However, Emmy explains that their father didn't quit his job. Instead, he was fired since the company no longer needed him. Their father hid it from them because he was embarrassed. Their mother, on the other hand, is unhappy about their father losing his job, but she is unable to express it as it wasn't even his fault. Emma even opens his eyes about how their father isn't opposed to Mark attending art school, but they just cannot afford it now. Mark is shocked by all this for a few moments Then he asks Emma how her football game went, and she informs him that they lost. In the next scene, he talks to his maths professor at school and inquires about the time loop. Mark makes a list of possibilities with the help of his teacher and ticks out those that the professor believes are impossible. Finally, the professor concludes that a singularity may cause the time to repeat itself. They can get out of the time loop if they can escape the singularity. Later, Mark and Margaret meet again, but they are tired of looking for perfect coincidences. Mark is also starting to think that making sense of the time loop is pointless, but Margaret thinks they shouldn't give up and that there are many crazy things they can still do. Frustrated, Mark tells her to stop taking everything so lightly, but Margaret claims he's only upset because she rejected him. To cheer him up, Margaret takes him to display home, and they spend the day wrecking the place to distract themselves from their situation. When they're done, Margaret explains that she believes that the world was ruined long before the time loop even started. Mark then says that he thinks if they travel far enough away from town, they can escape the time loop, but Margaret isn't ready to leave yet. She believes leaving the loop will just lead them to get old and regret everything they could have done differently. Mark replies saying that what they currently have isn't actually living, and because of them, everyone else is stuck too. This makes Margaret feel guilty, and she reluctantly agrees to travel far away with him. So the following morning, they go to the airport and get on a flight going to Tokyo. Mark believes that because they'll be crossing the international date line, they'll finally be able to escape the time loop. Mark is excited as he believes if they escape the loop, it'll be like saving the world. He puts on an eye mask to rest, but when he takes it off, it appears that Margaret has left and he can't follow her now. Mark passes the time in the plane by sketching the small, perfect moments that he and Margaret have encountered so far. We also see a drawing of Margaret in a spacesuit amongst his other drawings. The moment finally arrives. The plane crosses the international date line, and as soon as it does, Mark awakens in his bedroom once more. As usual, he eats breakfast with his family, but he is shocked to see that Emma did not insult him as she usually does. Mark then inquires about his father's book, and his father eagerly discusses the Civil War with him. Emma's team wins this time. Later, Mark quietly places the winning lottery ticket near a woman at the diner. He then decided to use the tractor to save a kitten. He also joins the elderly couple in playing chess and praises the construction guy on his piano playing. He concentrates and does well in school too, and spends his afternoon practicing music with Emma. After that, he tries to skate but fails to land properly, breaking his wrist. While at the hospital, he notices Margaret and decides to follow her. He sees Margaret walk into a patient's room, and Mark realizes that her mother is terminally ill and Jared is a medical student who is treating her. The following day, Mark rushes outside to find and hug his mother. He then visits Henry and tells him about the time loop while they're playing video games, but Henry thinks he's just joking. Mark then proceeds to discuss Margaret and how it feels like he discovered the fourth dimension when they met. Margaret has made Mark's life meaningful, but he now knows that their story isn't a love story, and he isn't the hero. Instead, this story is just about Margaret. In the meantime, Margaret goes about her day. She wakes up alone and depressed in her house, worrying about her dying mother. Back at the hospital, she confides in her mother about her ruined relationship with Mark, but her mother assures her that it's not too late to fix things. Later, Margaret is sitting on the bench where the truck with wings usually comes. When the man who always occupies the bench arrives, she offers him the seat. Unexpectedly, she notices a dog and realizes that it's the lost dog she was looking for initially. Margaret considers returning the puppy to its owners, but instead pays a visit to Henry. Margaret talks about meeting Mark during the time loop while playing a video game with him. She says she chose not to return the puppy because it would go missing again the next day. After they complete the game stage, Margaret abruptly comments on how dreadful death is, both in real life and in games. However, postponing losing someone will result in the loss of oneself. Henry then continues with the game and unlocks a map, which causes Margaret to have a revelation. She rushes out the door, leaving Henry with the dog. She then makes a list of all the perfect things and drives around town, observing them all as they occur. At home, while looking at the map, she feels like something is missing, so she uses strings to replicate the map into a three-dimensional model. She notices that the model shadows create a four-dimensional cube on her wall, with one section missing. After considering the time and region and doing some calculations, she predicts something important will happen at the community pool on 7 p.m. Margaret pays a visit to her mom the next morning. She cries to her mother, saying that if she finds the last perfect moment, the loop will end and she won't be able to be with her mother anymore. Her mother advises her to accept life as it is. She may lose time, but in the end, she'll gain more opportunities to experience new things and move forward. Her mother assures her that everything will be worth it in the end. When Margaret goes to the swimming pool at 7 p.m., she sees Mark there. She sits with him and reveals that his theory was correct the entire time, and that the perfect moments made a pattern, but one specific moment was missing, and the only way to escape this loop is to find that moment. Mark then confesses that he saw her at the hospital, and he promises that he'll never come in between her and her mother. Margaret then reveals that the night before the time loop started, she had been informed that this would be her mother's last day to live, and during the night, all she could think about was how she was not prepared to face a future without her mother, and how she wanted time to stop. Her wish came true somehow, and she was relieved that the time loop occurred. The only thing that didn't make sense was why was Mark also caught up in the loop, and she concludes that he is here so that she doesn't have to face the future alone. After this heartfelt scene, Margaret kisses Mark, hence creating the missing perfect moment. After that, Margaret pays her final visit to her mother. She and Mark then leave the hospital, unsure about what will happen once it strikes midnight. They look at Mark's watch, and when it's finally midnight, it starts raining out of nowhere, indicating the end of the time loop. In the last scene, we see them give back the lost dog to its owners. Thanks for watching. To support the channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button and press the bell icon to get new video updates.